So I'll hand over to Roberto and Bharath to give a brief introduction of who they are and what they do. And I'm particularly delighted that today is also our first in-person event for our new Granite Data Solutions business, and Roberto is our business partner in that. So without further ado, over to you two, gentlemen.
Thanks, Dave, and welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. I know it's a bit of an early start for some of us, so really great to see you all. For those of you I haven't really properly met, my name's Roberto. I'm the co-founder of Granite Data. A bit about me, so my background is in engineering science, but I spent a lot of time in management consulting, had a few strategy, transformation, architecture roles in big corporates, and then a couple of divisional CIO roles where I led data teams and projects. And it probably was up until maybe a couple of years ago where I really started paying close attention to the data industry and got really excited about the changes that were happening, and really wanted to start a business around that and use my experience to help other businesses build capability in that space. So that sort of led me to start this business with Dave. Now, today we have a guest, Bharath Venkataraman, who actually I used to work with at Toll, and he's flown down specially from Sydney, so really appreciate that. Bharath, welcome, and thanks for joining us today, and I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, good to see everyone here early in the morning. My name's Bharath Venkataraman, and I head the data function at Freedom Furniture Group. So if you're ever looking for good furniture, reach out. I can get you some special discounts. Yeah, look, I've been in this role for about 18 months, and prior to that, worked with the likes of Toll and Optus and different data leadership roles. So I've just done data all my life in different ways and forms. Yeah, look, really excited to be a part of this this discussion, and hopefully we can all take something away from here.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, the topic of these sessions is conversations with thought leaders. Conversations being the active word, so you really want to get a discussion going. So maybe we'll start off with if we can just. Dave, you mind just flipping to the next slide? I think, Bharath, do you want to lead this part of the discussion?
So I suppose it's just, we thought we'd start with just sort of taking a few minutes to just look at one of the data or analytics maturity model, right? Most organizations do that at the start to sort of understand where you're at and where do you want to get to. I suppose that's setting the vision for your team or your organization from a data point of view as a data leader. If you go on the internet, you'll find about thousands of these. They're all different to suit different industries. This is probably more generic, something that we just wanted to keep very simple to understand, where do you think your organization would be along this journey, and what do you need to do to get to, where you want to be. Bearing in mind that, not everyone needs to be at 5. I don't think that's the measure of success. It's about your business, what adds value for you, and where do you think is the sweet spot for your business where data is actually starting to deliver that value, right? So
I'm happy to kick off with it. So at the moment I'm working with an organisation called the AVN Group. They're Australia's probably top maybe two or three residential construction company. And we're on this business, we're on a journey to raise our maturity, but I'd say we're probably at a 1 in that it's all about the business wanting certain information at a certain time, but without any kind of foresight or planning, and only part of the infrastructure in place. And we'd definitely like to raise it to a 2 or 3. What about Freedom? Where would you guys be?
Yeah, I think we'll be at a 1. Look, I mean, again, there's different ways to look at it, right? There's that where you're at, but then there are also these good to great use cases that you can run in parallel. So I'd say we sometimes do projects that are in that space where we're around number 3, but largely sitting still around 1. If you just looked at a day-to-day or view of what the data function did or what the business did with the data, I'd still think it's largely 1. And we've got a plan around how we want to consistently be at 3 over the course of next 12 to 18 months.
But are you seeing the trends that as companies place more value on data and business technology gets easier to understand from a business user perspective, then maybe in the future the CDO role will go straight to the CEO? Or how do you sort of, or will there be, how do you see all that playing out?
I think at the moment that's been the trend for a while, I think, in some of the more mature organizations. And it's not only a CDO role. I find that strategy goes really hand in hand with that role as well. So there's a lot of chief data and strategy officers that you can come across, and they probably directly report to the CEO.
I find that the larger clients in particular probably don't follow that level. You know, I've got one client who would be a 5 when it comes to weather forecasting because it's so important to their business, right? They've got partnerships with BOM and all these sort of things. So I was just trying to think what parts of the business, whereas demand and supply of energy, they're probably a 4. In their back office, they're a 1. Right? So putting that measure against the whole organisation, I'm sitting here going, I think it's impossible, you know. And then I ask, well, do they need to be a 4 or a 5 for everything? Answer's probably no. There's no value in doing that probably. The cost of getting to that level of maturity wouldn't pay off.
The law of diminishing returns as you get.
Well, yeah. And maybe the back office might over time catch up because they'll get dragged along, but not because they need to or there's a case for doing it now. Another customer is a completely different industry. They're in agriculture. Their supply chain, predictive analytics, they're probably a 4 in their supply chain. They also market and trade in grain commodities. They're probably 3 heading to 4. Again, the rest of the business is probably at a 2, you know. So my point is that they're all at different levels depending on the nature of what's important to them. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that kind of goes back to what Bharath was saying about different parts of the business having sort of almost a siloed maturity. And just, Dave, on your question about the CDO type role, interestingly, so when I was at Myer, this was about 7 or 8 years ago now, 2015, they put in place a chief digital and data officer whom the CIO reported into. And because at the time that was seen as, you know, a critical role to drive data maturity, tech maturity in the business. But they've since wound that back so far that the CIO actually reports into the CFO, which is, you know, that's kind of, you know, very old school. So I think it, you know, it depends on where I guess the business is at, what they want to achieve at the time. What is it, do you think, that has the most effect in terms of raising that capability? So, you know, there are a few things that obviously need to happen, but is there any kind of, you know, 1, 2, 3 different things that these businesses do?
A lot of it's around data quality. A lot of clients I've seen in the past.
Yeah.
If you don't have the quality of people don't trust the data, then the uptake is not there. So being able to actually provide quality data in a timely sort of manner. Otherwise, we've got overnight delays because of batch feeds and all sort of stuff. So people think, oh, if something's not going to be refreshed within the time, they won't use the system, or they'll go somewhere else to get it, or they'll keep it in their own spreadsheets. So yeah, the quality and timeliness of the data is key to the uptake.
I think education is super important in the world today from a data perspective, to the point where we're really serious as a law firm about it. So we're working with MIT and we have an accreditation program. And so all our lawyers need to get accredited, and there are different levels. So, you know, like a lean approach, white, green, brown and black. So white is awareness of data. Green is you understand data and you can use it to make decisions. Brown, you're actively using it. And black, we only invite people to be a black. And that means that you're a role model, that you can train people, that you're actively using data effectively.
That's a very clever system.
Yeah, it is.
I like it.
It's good.
Because it creates almost like a mystique around the black, which draws people to the program.
Especially lawyers.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer, by the way.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment around, I mean, when you talk around the higher hiring scale, what I tend to observe is that in the executive leadership teams. They don't, you talk about consistent and effortless production. Most recent client, of getting the organisational scorecards and dashboards with the teams below them, the flurry of activity, and it's certainly anything other than effortless. And I think there's also a risk of perception of, to get this scorecard and this dashboard and so forth, that it isn't just easy, and then, so whilst management might have they might reflect in some of their areas that they're a 3 or a 4, realistically they're a 1 or a 2 because, it's ad hoc and they might not be, fully aware of the effort that goes into this. And then the teams below it, and I think it also comes down to data quality as well, the teams below it are just trying to get these scorecards out just to meet, certain stakeholder expectations. And then it can really have a bit of a cynicism around how the data is used. Whilst at the C-suite it looks all, it's all complete and everything like that.
Yeah.
But just below it, that integrity and that lack of, effortless, that it's too much effort.
Oh, I totally agree. And in fact, you've just described the pain that Bharath and I went through a number of years at Toll doing that exact thing. We spent, every month, almost the whole month building a dashboard. And to the C-suite, it looked like it was very simple and clean, but below the surface, there's a lot of manual work, a lot of collation, and
That's a really good point. But I think if they're doing this week in, week out to produce the same set of numbers, then they're definitely at a 1. I mean, no matter what. So even if it fits all the needs of the C-suite or whoever is the audience that's consuming that information, then it's definitely a 1 because of the amount of repetitive effort that we go through. I mean, in certain cases, it could be, 2 use cases could be completely different, right? So in Toll, whilst we had that regular set of reporting that we would go through, we would have at least a couple of use cases every month which would be completely out of the blue, right? Oh, the board wants this. And we'd just go, right, we don't have the data, it's unstructured. There's no point in just gathering everything and putting it in a database or whatever it is. So we're just going to go and collect all the information and massage it and get the numbers out, or if it's a pack or whatever it is. I think that can be strategic, right? Because it's actually driving a different message, or it's producing a different outcome every time that you try and do something like that. But yeah, if you're going through and all of us, I'm pretty sure I speak for everyone in this room, at some stage there's always an element of that repetitive manual reporting, no matter what state-of-the-art tool or platform you're using. It's just a byproduct of the business, I think. And the quicker you can identify and minimize that, the better value you can drive.
I guess you raised a couple of really interesting points. It'd be great to get your input. So you really, if you talk about legacy data, and how many times have we seen, massive businesses being sort of upset or upended by new startups? You think about Post years ago, the transformation with more nimble, providers coming to the market. The Toll experience. You think about Tabcorp versus Sportsbet. So you're talking about data legacy. So interested to know how you can deal with that issue. Online banks versus the traditional bricks and mortars banks, that type of thing. So it'd be good to get your view around that, and then also around you've touched upon there around using data is a lot easier now than it was. So I'd be interested to go through those themes a bit if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think data is absolutely can be a competitive platform, which I'll talk about a bit later. But one of the trends that I've seen in the industry in the last 5 years, which was one of the things that really excited me about the space, was the amount of change in the tooling and what's possible now that just wasn't possible 5-10 years ago. It's much easier for companies of any size to build really strong capabilities. I think I had someone from REA Group. Is that you, Brad?
Yes.
Yeah, interested to hear what... I know REA Group has got a really strong name in data. I know you guys use BigQuery, I think, over there, Google.
BigQuery is the biggest one, yeah. So it's interesting, I think probably to echo what you were saying, there's different parts of REA which will fall anywhere on that scale. There's plenty that will be in the 4 and the 5, and there's other areas which much lower down. So I think it really depends what part of the business you're looking at and what the goal is. I think for us, it's a tech-led business, and we've got, maybe not as many developers as other organizations, but we've got plenty of people who are generating tons of data and have access to tons of data to different levels. So a big concern for us is data classification, risk and security, because we have a lot of financial information and personal information of consumers. So we'd like to do all sorts of amazing things with this without having to sit in front of a royal commission in a couple of years around I guess creepy behaviors, how I was describing it to Sam earlier. So we're going through a phase of what tools, platform tools can we invest in to let different teams handle their data, generate data that is then useful. So minimal effort for them to generate things without breaking laws or things like that. So really the investment is in that side of it. And again, different levels of maturity depending where you look. So different focuses. But yeah, like you say, data, there's a whole data team with BigQuery as the main one.
Interesting, yeah. I've heard some of the stuff that you guys do with the predicting house prices when you get your house, when there's that valuation tool and it tells you how much your house is valued and what kind of data that goes into that valuation. It's quite complex, quite interesting though. Because in the last 10 years, I would say, I've noticed that there's been a lot of failed data projects or projects that have failed to deliver on expectation. Does anyone else notice that, or is that, yeah, good, I'm glad the people are nodding. It's not just me. And I thought, well, then why is it there are some companies that have gotten so good at building data capabilities that it's actually then become their competitive platform? And the companies that I think about, listed here, Netflix, LinkedIn, Uber, Airbnb, and there's a whole another list that you could make. So, what is it about these companies that we could learn from potentially to raise our data capability? And first of all, it's worth acknowledging these are Silicon Valley companies. They've got a lot of investment into tech. They can attract and afford the best talent. They're digitally native, so data is kind of part of what they do. So all of that counts for a lot, and it's really hard to just copy and paste a culture. So that's not necessarily something that you could easily do. But I thought, well, what else is there that is common to these businesses that is easily or relatively easily replicable? So I picked out some themes that I think have had a large degree of leverage in terms of the return that they give on data capability. So it is oversimplified, I know, but we don't have all day, and this could be a very deep discussion. So this is just for the purpose of today, but hopefully you find it interesting and something to think about. The first is over here in their data stack. So leaders invest in their infrastructure. Interestingly, all these companies are listed here, they all built their tools internally. Now, at the time when they did that, it was because there was nothing available for their needs, so they went off and built it. And interestingly, some of the tools are so good that they open sourced them and they have now become industry standard. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Apache Airflow. That was developed by Airbnb. And that's now very popular data pipeline workflow automation tool. And there are a number of others. So the takeaway here though is not to go and build your own tools. In fact, please don't do that. I would recommend against it. That is a pathway to failure. And these days, the tool sets have changed so much and they're so good, and we've kind of mentioned them previously. Snowflake, BigQuery, Databricks, there's a whole list of Fivetran if you've heard of that. These tools, honestly, they're amazing. These days, anyone, any size business with the right engineer and the right set of tools can set up a data capability, just the infrastructure part, that's almost as good as these in a day. It is crazy. Whereas years ago it would take many months, if not years. I've been part of projects to stand up data infrastructure in data centers that have just gone on and on and on. So this is one of the things that's got me really excited about the space, the amount of change in this area. So the takeaway here is actually, if you're not exploring these cloud-based, highly automated tools, that's definitely a place to gain a large amount of leverage. The next is in data governance. Now, looking at these businesses, at least initially, they didn't seem to have formal data governance programs, but the types of activities that they did would be considered data governance because data was so important to what they did. And one of the things that was common to all of them was that they make data widely and easily available. And they did that through a data catalogue. And all these businesses built their own data catalogue tools. The one I've listed here, LinkedIn open source theirs, and it's called Data Hub. It's again quite a popular tool, but there are a bunch of them. It's not about the tool though. This is about making the data widely available, and that partly drives that data culture and data adoption, and it also lifts the burden on central data teams of having to constantly respond to admin requests of supplying data. So data cataloguing there seems to be a really key theme common to all these businesses. And then finally is the data culture, and there's this is spoken about a lot, and we've already mentioned some of these things today. Leadership. Another one that we haven't mentioned is experimentation. So a lot of these companies experiment a lot. But the thing that was probably the most common to all of them was data literacy. So having business users and end consumers really, with a level of understanding of how to use data. Now, if you ask these companies, well, how do you boost data literacy in the business? Well, they would probably say, well, you hire people who are data literate. That's not always necessarily helpful, and you don't necessarily have control over those decisions. So what Airbnb did, which is interesting, was that they created what they call a data university. And it's very similar to what you guys have done as well, and that's why I thought it was a great example. And there was sort of 3 tiers of education, and the base one being everyone had to do, and it was about basic statistics, basic data-driven decision making, and that is the thing that raises the bar in terms of capability in the conversations, and then what people are able to do with the data. And if you think about the types of things that the business consumers are using data for, it's revenue uplift, customer growth or retention, profit. These key metrics that when they go up have a direct correlation to data investment, and that's what you want. You want your data ROI to be very clearly linked to those metrics. So that is a fairly, I'd say relatively easy thing to do. You obviously have to have buy-in from the top, but you don't have to create the curriculum. There's a lot of curriculum available that you can curate, and it's it's a high return activity for relatively low effort. I don't know if you want to comment any more on that line because you've got direct experience, but I think that's great what you guys are doing.
Yeah, look, I think the key thing here as well is making something contextual, because people will relate to it if it's in their context. So when you say this thing's available, there are things available. Like we could have just gone and said to MIT, give us your data training. But what we did was we actually spent a great deal of time taking what they do and going, okay, what would suit a lawyer who works in tax? What would suit a lawyer who works in, technology? And so making things that are really contextual means you get more buy-in. And so when we launched our data literacy program, the buy-in we got was unbelievable. We had 2,000 lawyers go through the training in a matter of months. Led to an award last year for the AFR Most Innovative Company. Wow. So, and that's unusual for a law firm. So I think the key thing is making sure that if you are going to do education, understanding the context that you're in, and then also what would be useful and how do you use it to differentiate yourself. I mean, because, why would you train lawyers on data? Well, the reason why is because they have to provide insight, and that is what will differentiate them from other lawyers. And so what's right in your context is really important, and then how will you use that data to make sure it's a differentiator?
It's great input, yeah.
But just answer that, because obviously most of these, in fact all of them have been founded in the last 15 years or so, and obviously all tech companies, but when you're dealing with non-tech companies that are older than 15, maybe hundreds of years old, some of these businesses, getting the key sponsors on side, if you go use your data, contextualise exactly what you're saying, Lani, say you go to, I don't know, the head of customer service at Telstra and say, here's some data to talk about customer retention, customer churn, straight away, bang, and they're the people who are going to be paying for it. You're starting to win the hearts and minds, aren't you?
With the education, did they come from doing the course and then find there was a disparate or a difference between what they actually could do when they got back to their job, or did you make sure what was taught was also capable to be aligned to what they're doing today in the workplace?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is how do you apply what you've learned? And so our training doesn't include practical activities that they could then apply to a situation. In fact, we then incentivise lawyers to use the what they've learned into managing a real client situation. And so, for example, if you're working on a project with a client and then you use data and you use legal tech, so you use the two, you get a multiplier effect. So, for example, let's say I was working with Toll, as an example, as a lawyer, and I use data really well based on what I've learned, and I use legal tech. And let's say this activity I did for you took 3 hours. It would have, if they hadn't had those skills, it might have taken 12 hours. So we're going to charge Toll 3 hours for the work because that's what it took. But the lawyer can bill 12 hours because that would have what they would have taken if they'd not used data and they'd not used legal tech. And so they don't get penalised, they actually get rewarded from a billable target perspective. But obviously the client gets charged the right amount of time. Two things it does. Firstly, what it does is, for the lawyer themselves, they learn the data skill, they're using the data skill and legal tech, but also they're educating the client. And then clients come back and go, hey, do you remember when you worked with us and you did X? Can we do something similar with this problem? And then what we'll do is, well, let's understand the problem a bit more. And they go, actually, for your problem in this situation, we do this. And so to your point about really understanding the needs and the problem, what we do is we apply data, we apply design thinking, we apply legal tech, and then we apply an agile way as well.
Wow.
I'm glad you clarified, because I just heard bill 3, charge 12.
No, that's on camera as well. All over it.
Cool. I think we're about out of time, but just to finish, I thought I'd read this out. So when I was preparing with Roberto and Bharath some information for today, and the title being obviously Winning with Data, what the best companies are doing and how you can too, I thought it might be a bit of fun if I put it into ChatGPT to give me a 150-word answer. And this is what it said. Winning with data means using data-driven insights to make informed decisions and gain a competitive advantage in the industry. The best companies are leveraging data to optimize their operations, improve customer experience and drive innovation. First, they're investing in the right technology and tools to collect and analyze large amounts of data efficiently. This includes AI and machine learning algorithms to identify patterns and trends in the data. Second, they have a culture that prioritizes data-driven decision-making, where data is integrated into all aspects of the business, and employees are trained to interpret and use data effectively. Third, they are using data to personalize their customer experience and deliver products and services that meet specific needs. Nearly finished. Fourth, they're continuously experimenting and testing new ideas and strategies based on data insights and using that information to iterate and improve. To win with data, businesses must adopt a holistic approach that includes the right technology, a culture that prioritizes data, a customer-centric mindset, and a willingness to continuously learn and adapt based on data-driven insights. Oh, that's pretty good.
Can I just say, I spent several months researching this. I know what I'm doing in the future. We did not coordinate that, by the way. That was not coordinated.
No. So thank you, everyone, for making the effort to come along this morning. Greatly appreciated, as always. Thanks ever so much for getting involved in the conversation. Yeah, I mean, the world of data is fascinating, moving into AI. You know, I think as humans, we're all still going to have be gainfully employed in 10 years' time, but I suspect it will look a very different employment landscape to what it is today. Roberto, Bharath, thank you very much for running the show today, and I wish everyone a pleasant rest of the day. Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.